Hello and welcome. You're watching UATV News with me, Ksenia Buhai. Let's start with the latest developments. Meeting with Apple management and lecture at Stanford University. This is the plan for the visit of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to California. In addition, the head of state will hold talks with leading investors and venture funds of Silicon Valley, as well as meet with Ukrainian entrepreneurs and specialists. The president of Ukraine has already arrived in San Francisco. And before that, historic negotiations took place between the presidents of Ukraine and the United States, Volodymyr Zelensky and Joe Biden, in Washington, D.C. Following their results, the parties issued a joint statement. More details in the following report.
Productive, constructive, and in a real masculine atmosphere. This is how Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky described his first meeting with his American counterpart, U.S. President Joe Biden.
I don't know if chemistry has arisen, but the fact that instead of an hour the meeting lasted 2 hours indicates that the parties are interested in the dialogue and the result of this dialogue respectively. I believe that the meeting was in a normal, productive, maybe not always in a sunny, but in serious, constructive atmosphere.
American president reaffirmed the U.S. strong commitment to Ukraine, its independence, sovereignty and territorial integrity.
In my visit with President Zelensky today, I reaffirmed the United States' support for Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity in the face of Russian aggression, our close cooperation on energy security, and our shared democratic values.
At the end of the meeting, Joe Biden and Volodymyr Zelensky released a joint statement on strategic partnership, where they declared deepening of cooperation in all areas. The document contains 5 main points: security and defense, democracy, justice and human rights, energy security and climate, economic growth and countering the COVID-19 pandemic. U.S. President noted the reforms that are taking place in Ukraine.
He especially noted the land and judicial reforms. Everyone sees the infrastructure changes in Ukraine and the result. Maybe I can't observe them from my office in such a way, but I'm glad that at the level of the President of the United States, they are positively perceived.
But the main topic of the meeting between the two presidents was the topic of Ukraine's security.
The topic included NATO, the security of the Black Sea region, and strengthening of Ukraine's defense. Nord Stream 2 was on this topic as well, because for Ukraine this is primarily a matter of security, not economics. A lot of time was devoted to the topic of NATO. We have powerful arguments that the United States and Ukraine have never spoken about at the highest level before.
The United States will also provide Ukraine with $60 million in aid, which includes Javelin missile systems and other lethal and non-lethal defense equipment.
The results that have been achieved not only in deepening of military technical cooperation in various sectors of the economy and not only in the economy in general, these are impressive results. I'm convinced that this marks a new stage of cooperation between Ukraine and the United States.
Volodymyr Zelensky's visit to the United States continues. He has already arrived in California. According to his schedule, he delivers a lecture in the Stanford University. In honor of the arrival of the Ukrainian leader, the building of the San Francisco City Hall was illuminated with the colors of the Ukrainian flag. This is the first visit of the President of Ukraine to California in the history of country's independence. Reported by Vadim Kramer and Alexandra Hutnik, UATV News.
Equality of rights for men and women, development of barrier-free Ukraine, and culture diplomacy. First Lady of Ukraine Olena Zelenska took part in the meeting of Power Women Leaders. There she spoke about her activities. In particular, they discussed the summit of the First Ladies and Gentlemen, which was recently held in Kyiv. The participants agreed to exchange views on the development of the format and content of the summit. Among those present were American diplomats, wives of senators and heads of companies. They also talk about their success stories and the challenges they faced. Ukraine, in its confrontation with Russia, ensures security not only for itself but also for other countries. This was announced by the Vice Prime Minister, Minister for the Reintegration of the Temporarily Occupied Territories of Ukraine, Oleksiy Reznikov. He said that shipping in the Black Sea is under threat. 3 NATO countries are in the risk zone, namely Turkey, Bulgaria and Romania. And the union of Russia and Belarus directly affects 4 other NATO members, the Baltic states and Poland. By deploying nuclear weapons in the occupied Crimea, the Russian Federation intends to gain influence in the Black Sea as well as in Syria, Africa and southern part of Europe.
It is unlikely that those weapons would be directed against Ukraine. They will be directed against the entire civilized world. This is a convenient logistical platform for the Russian army to make claims not only to the Black Sea but also to Syria, Africa and southern Europe.
Russia blocks free shipping in the Black and Azov seas. The U.S. mission to the OSCE announced that militarization of the occupied Crimea continues. According to the U.S. representative to the OSCE, George Kent, by obstructing shipping, the Russian Federation is violating international law. Earlier at the summit of the Crimean platform, the diplomat recalled that Russia withdrew only part of its armed forces from the borders with Ukraine and from the occupied peninsula.
This spring we witnessed the largest concentration of Russian troops and equipment in occupied Crimea and along the Russian border with Ukraine since the Russian invasion in 2014. Russia has not provided any substantive response to Ukraine's legitimate request, in accordance with the Vienna document on providing additional information about this unusual and provocative military activity. Russia has not provided any reasonable explanation for its actions.
A new report on human rights violations in the occupied Crimea has been published by the United Nations Secretary-General. The document covers the period from July 1st last year to June 30th this year. It records in particular cases of torture of Crimeans, searches, harassment of freedom of speech, trials in absentia that do not meet with international standards, and the movement of illegally convicted persons to the territory of Russia. It is noted that the number of arbitrary detentions of members of religious minorities has increased almost fivefold. At the same time, the Russian occupation authorities remain unpunished. According to information available to the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, no tangible progress has been made in investigating the 43 cases of enforced disappearances, 39 men and 4 women, documented in Crimea since March 2014. In stuffy, cramped atmosphere and under constant video surveillance, resident of Crimea Raif Evziev has been held in such conditions in the pre-trial detention facility of the occupied Simferopol. This was reported by the Ukrainian Parliamentary Commissioner for Human Rights Lyudmila Denisova. According to her, Raif Evziev and 7 other prisoners are kept in a cramped cell. There is a person with mental disorders among them, posing threat to the lives of cellmates. Lyudmila Denisova called on the Russian ombudsman to ensure the rights of Raif Evziev. The conditions of detention and inaction of the detention facility management violate Raif Evziev's right to life, appropriate conditions of detention and respect for private life, enshrined in Articles 2 and 8 of the Convention for the Protection of Human Rights and Fundamental Freedoms, and paragraphs 10 and 22 of the Standard Minimum Rules for the Treatment of Prisoners approved by the UN Economic and Social Council. To remind, after the searches in the houses of the Crimean Tatars on August 17th, Raif Evziev and 4 more his compatriots were detained by the occupying security forces, accusing him of involvement in Hizb ut-Tahrir organization, which is recognized as terroristic in Russia. The occupation court chose a preventive measure for Raif Evziev, 1 month and 25 days in a pre-trial detention facility. The Jewish New Year is coming. This year it is celebrated between the 6th and 8th of September. More than 100 members of Kyiv police keep their duty in Boryspil airport during the arrival of the Hasidic pilgrims for sacred devotion. This year, over 50,000 pilgrims are expected to arrive in Ukraine. The main center of pilgrimage is the city of Uman in Cherkasy region, where the Tzaddik Nachman was buried. However, he is just one of many Jewish spiritual leaders acknowledged among Ukrainian Jews. Details in the following report.
Once a year, the small Ukrainian town of Uman becomes a place of religious devotion for thousands of Jews. Pilgrims come here from all over the world to celebrate one of the main holidays in Judaism, Rosh Hashanah. Here the founder of the Breslau Hasidism, Tzaddik Nachman, is buried. His followers visit the grave, pray and cheerfully celebrate the Jewish New Year. However, Tzaddik Nachman is just one of many Ukraine-born influential spiritual leaders of the Jewish people.
We are talking about Baal Shem Tov. Baal Shem Tov is the founder of the Hasidim movement. We are talking about Alter Rebbe, the first Lubavitcher Rebbe who lived in Ukraine and was buried in Gadich. We are talking about the Lubavitcher Rebbe who passed recently and he is still chief Rebbe of the world for us now.
For centuries, Ukraine served as the motherland for Jewish people. Jewish settlements on the territory of southern Ukraine and Crimea are mentioned in ancient Greek sources. Notices about Jewish communities in Kiev and Chernihiv are contained in the oldest known written sources. More than 150,000 Jews lived in western Ukraine in the 17th century. It is not surprising that in the 18th century Ukraine became the birthplace of Hasidism founded by the Baal Shem Tov. Menachem Mendel Schneerson, Lubavitcher Rabbi, was born in Mykolaiv in 1902. He later became the chief rabbi of the world.
The future spiritual leader of the Jewish people was born in the proletarian city of Mykolaiv in the Jewish area. He descended from a family of one of the most famous, reputable rabbis of the city, Levi Yitzhak Schneerson.
Although Schneerson spent most of his life abroad, the city of Mykolaiv is associated with his childhood years. A memorial plaque was installed next to the place of birth of Rebbe, recalling his contribution to the development of Hasidism. Some of the oldest stories suggest, as during the Odessa pogrom of 1905, the 3-year-old Schneerson rescued dozens of people. He calmed children and even adults, thus helping them to survive. The 7th Lubavitch Rebbe Schneerson died in 1994 in New York. Chief Rabbi of Kiev, Jonathan Benjamin Markovich, remembers the time he was an apprentice of a famous rabbi.
I was also fascinated with what I saw because I also studied with him, and any person who saw him, met him, and learned from his writings usually got fascinated.
Each of the above-mentioned spiritual leaders of the Jewish people are sanctified among the Jews. However, the intensive pilgrimage to Ukraine befalls on September-October for the celebration of the Jewish New Year, and tens of thousands rush to the grave of Tzaddik Nachman, the grandson of Baal Shem Tov. Reported by Nick Starkov, Valery Bakus, UATV News.
Today, the Ukrainian hryvnia marks the 25th anniversary of introduction. On September 2, 1996, it has replaced the karbovanets and became the national currency. The National Bank of Ukraine opened a free exhibition on this occasion to open the open-air hryvnia museum. It is located on the Kontraktova Square in Kiev. 18 interactive stands tell the story of the national currency. The audio guide to the exhibition was recorded not by professional speakers, but by the bank's experts. The exhibition will last until September 30th. That's all for today. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned. More updates on our official website, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter pages.